Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The UK economy had a boost in the first 3 months of this year as it grew by 0.5%, up from 0.2% in the previous quarter. The Office for National Statistics said the increase was partly driven by businesses stockpiling ahead of the expected Brexit date. Manufacturers saw their fastest expansion since the 1980s. Here's our economics correspondent, Darshini David.
Production lines at this manufacturer that supplies the car industry have gone into overdrive since the start of the year. They've stockpiled both raw materials and finished goods to protect against disruption in the event of a no-deal Brexit in March.
Normally holding sort of a week stock somewhere in that region. We're sort of holding much more than that, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks stock in some case, which isn't healthy for any business, but at least we have the confidence that if anything was to happen at borders, we could continue to supply.
He's not alone. This type of contingency planning meant that manufacturing activity grew at its fastest rate for over 3 decades, by 2.2% in the first 3 months of 2019. Add in consumer spending, and GDP was up by 0.5% between January and March. A decent performance, but a different type of growth than had been expected just a few months ago. That was the past. What of the future? Well, this cutting-edge rocket engine plant is a taste of what Britain could be, thanks to an injection of private and public money. We need businesses up and down the country to invest more to ensure the economy flourishes in the long term, creating even more jobs and ensuring higher wages. But, as the Chancellor told me here, that kind of investment is still being held back by Brexit uncertainty.
Business investment is much lower than we would like it to be. Investment in infrastructure, investment in skills. We have to do that if we want to ensure the prosperity of future generations.
We've got a subset.
Tomorrow's technology may be dazzling, but the Chancellor knows our current performance is underpowered. The boost from stockpiling was temporary. The payback may be weaker growth ahead, at least until Brexit is cleared up. Darshini David, BBC News, Oxfordshire.
Now, was it all down to Brexit stockpiling or a sign that the economy is robust, with new figures showing the highest quarterly boost in manufacturing since the 80s? The rate of growth in the UK economy grew from 0.2% in the last 3 months of 2018 to 0.5% in the first quarter of this year. The Chancellor hailed the figures and told our business editor Siobhan Kennedy he expected companies to hold off on spending until a Brexit deal is done. And he insisted no deal was off the cards.
Under the gloss of today's strong economic figures, 2 telltale facts. Nervous investors are hoarding gold and nervous manufacturers are stockpiling parts. At this electric motor factory spun out of Oxford University, they're gearing up for a big first order with an Italian luxury car maker. But it's the force of Brexit they're first having to face.
We didn't know what would happen on the 29th of March. We thought there might be a crash out. We did bring in inventory to make sure that at least for 3 months we wouldn't have an issue with that.
Do you carry on stockpiling because October is still another question mark?
We'll unwind and then we'll start to wind up again as we come towards the end of October. I mean, it's a howlingly inefficient way to run a company.
Cumulatively, manufacturers drove an extra $5 billion of spending, stockpiling spare parts and rushing to send out orders. Fears of a no-deal Brexit boosting the economy in the first 3 months of the year. A fact not lost on the Chancellor, touring another high-tech hotspot just up the road.
Well, the numbers today are good news for the economy. They show that the underlying strength of the British economy remains. But you're right, of course, the figures were actually much better than originally expected for the first quarter, and some element of that is stock building ahead of a potential no-deal exit in March.
The reality is investment by business stalled for the whole of 2018 thanks to Brexit. It did pick up slightly at the start of this year, but even the Chancellor said he wasn't fooled.
But obviously, we would like to see business investment picking up. Personally, I don't think that's going to happen until we've resolved our future relationship with Europe.
But not every business can wait.
We're being asked the really difficult questions by these European customers, and there is only one answer, absent a deal, which is we'll put manufacturing in Europe. So we're looking at making a £40 million investment in mainland Europe and 200 plus job growth in mainland Europe, all because of Brexit.
And that's a big investment not to put right here in the UK.
It's a tragedy if we're not able to do that in the UK, and Brexit's forced us into that decision.
But remember, for every anxious big business, there are dozens of small ones for whom Brexit is yet to bite as shoppers continue to spend.
Maybe we're in a little Oxford bubble, but everybody is still buying cake, everybody is still out spending, and so far it hasn't affected us, and I just don't think we should worry too much until something happens that we need to worry about.
Of course, it's positive that Britain's economic growth was better than expected, albeit thanks to a healthy dose of stockpiling. And consumer spending too seems to have held up despite the Brexit chaos. But even the Chancellor isn't trying to put a positive spin on these numbers because he knows the economy long term will remain subdued until a Brexit deal is done. But that's by no means a given.
If you can't get a deal and the Prime Minister is forced out, and potentially a no-deal Brexiteer replaces her, presumably that would be a disaster for the economy, in your view.
Parliament has made it clear repeatedly that it will not accept a no-deal outcome, and the parliamentary arithmetic will not change just because the leader of the Conservative Party changes.
But if a no-deal Brexiteer leader comes in and gets tougher and the whole scenario changes, that would be much worse for the economy, wouldn't it?
So, just to repeat, the parliamentary arithmetic is not going to change.
So he hopes, but this boss, for one, isn't convinced.
Yeah, I'm very worried that we might not get a deal at all. You know, my message to UK Parliament is stop thinking about your own careers and petty party politics. The UK government has got to learn to compromise to get a deal done, and then we can make that investment in manufacturing capability and in jobs here in the UK and not be forced to move that into Europe.
A clear message from business that unless a deal is done, this quarter's economic boost could very quickly fade.
Siobhan Kennedy reporting there from Oxfordshire.